Hi, my name is Ian Burgess, and for my persuasive speech, I chose to talk about Bernie Sanders, mainly because he is in the presidential election for 2016, and I think he should be the top vote in the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders' history goes along with what he's fighting for right now. He's fought for the same issues since the 60s that still haven't been resolved in our country. A lot of things that got resolved, he was fighting for years back and voted for years back, but our country was not willing to let that happen. So go back into his history. When Bernie Sanders was 20 and he was part of a committee at his school, he fought to end student segregation and student housing off campuses and on campuses. He also was in a committee that drove down to Washington, D.C. to go see MLK during his famous I Have a Dream speech. This will come up later while talking about his fight for racial justice in our country. After a while, after school, Bernie Sanders was running for many different positions in the Vermont government. He ended up winning mayor of Burlington, which is the biggest city in Vermont. And after his first term, he won his second term as mayor by a lot more. His first term was won by 12 votes, and his second by, I think, 20% or something. Once he was voted mayor, he became more popular within the state and was voted congressman of Vermont. While congressman, he voted against Bush's military act to bring military force into the Gulf War. And I quote Bernie Sanders saying, "I have a real fear that the region is not going to be more safe, peaceful, or more stable after the war." Sanders then, years after that, voted against the North American Free Trade Agreement, which was between Mexico, Canada, and the United States, to bring tax-free trade between the countries and between the borders, which basically made it so corporations could go down to Mexico and spend a lot less on workers and give them starving wages to bring back more profit for them and less jobs for America or the United States, and then also paying them nothing for what we would get paid way more in the United States. And then Sanders voted against the Defense of Marriage Act, which was a law to deny federal benefits to same-sex couples that were already legally married. Not that there was legal marriage everywhere there, but in the country then. But he was voting against it, which 2 years ago, 17 years from then, just got taken out. And that's when same-sex marriage got legalized in the United States. With the help of Sanders, of course, with fighting for that for 17 years. Sanders also stood up to major pharmaceutical companies that jack up prices to cancer drugs. AIDS drugs is a popular one now with a guy called PharmaBro or something like that. He's a major pharmaceutical company owner who jacked up the prices of HIV medication by 300%, making it from affordable like $50 to $500, $700. So he's been fighting that for a long time. He also started something in Vermont where he drives breast cancer patients up to Canada to go get their drugs because they can't afford it in the United States, so they get it cheaper in Canada and then drive back, which still goes on today. Overall, coming to now times, Bernie Sanders fights for what the people want, for the middle class, the lower class. He's fighting against the big banks, the corporations, and the 1%. Bernie Sanders wants to end loopholes that allow big corporates to not pay taxes, which is putting us into debt and making it so lower class people aren't having to pay more and not getting the funding they need from the government. One of the big things Bernie Sanders wants to do is make free tuition in public schools, like many countries like Germany, Finland, Greenland, Iceland, many other countries have already done, which is a great thing because the United States has one of the most expensive tuitions in the country, and it's just unaffordable for low-income families and people that want to get out of the low-income life and progress with education. It's just impossible. Student loans, he plans on doing this by using a tax on Wall Street, where he's taking a fraction of what Wall Street's tax from their profits, he's taking a small fraction of a tax and putting that towards the education of people. So basically he's funding the mainly the lower class that needs the help to go to school. He also plans to lower the interest rate of the student loans that are taken out, because the student loans interest rate is ridiculous, and it's actually the federal government is profiting off of the students that are going to a government-owned school. So the money that they're paying from the government is going paid back to the government, and then we have to pay them more. So Bernie Sanders wants to end that, or at least turn it to a small fraction of what right now's interest rate is, and then he wants to make it so everybody who has student loans already is paying back, is up to date with the lowest interest rate, and not just staying at the 7%, which I think is around what it is right now. So he's fighting for the low-income people in this country. Many of unions he supports, and keeping their jobs reliable. He fights for retired union workers, and yeah. Bernie Sanders is also fighting for racial justice, as I said earlier. He plans on changing the way police force works and putting them more implemented in a community, so they're actually working with the community and present in the community, instead of just a random officer coming to a random door and then end up innocent person is shot. He's fighting for it so that it ends what is today is like, I think 70% of jails are filled with Latinos and African Americans, and he thinks, well, obviously that is completely wrong. It shouldn't. Like, it's just a racial issue all over the country. It really is just needs to be taken care of. Bernie Sanders is also fighting for gender equality, because right now in our country, people are fighting for choosing what happens to a female body, whether abortion is legal or not, whether that's right or wrong. But it's not our choice, I guess. And compared to the woman that wants it, or that situation, we don't know the situation. He's also fighting for equal pay. It's just not right that men are getting paid more than females. It's equal world, equal opportunity is what he really fights for. There's no one different from another. He fights hard for the LGBT community. He's saying he also fought for them to finally get marriage legalized, but it's just not right to end there. We have to fight more and get them at the same level as straight couples right now. Most of all, Bernie Sanders fights for peace. There's a lot of global issues going on right now with ISIS, and his main concern is he knows that we have the strongest military in the world, and it's not about, and this is a quote from him, it's not about how many wars we can get into, but how many global or international conflicts we can end with peaceful manners. And I think that's just what ideally I think is perfect. I don't think we should just jump into a war. We should try to end things peacefully and not start a huge conflict that's just going to arise later in life. Bernie Sanders is my number one pick for presidential campaign because he fights for every single person out there. He's not fighting for the rich. He's fighting for any everyday person. You, me, person walking down the street, we're all equal to him, and I think that's great out of a president.